For more chapters, join my Patreon, link in description. Chapter 61, Coordinate Designation Spell 1. Yes. Well, first of all, a Surin professor did solve it. Do you know who the professor is? He is Professor Ludger Chelsea. He is the newly appointed professor. A new professor. I see. Understood. Does that help you? Yes, for now. I'll have to meet Professor Ludger Chelsea as soon as possible. I hope there will be progress in your investigation, Dame Terina. Thank you for your concerns, Your Highness. Yes, goodbye then. Oh yes, Your Highness Elendil. Yes, what's the matter? As Elendil was about to hang up the communication, Terina Lionhowl remembered something. The first princess said that she wants to hear from you. She said that she was disappointed because she hasn't heard anything from you recently, so she asked me to tell you in her stead. My sister? Yes. I understand. Yes. Then farewell. After the call ended, Elendil had no choice but to let out a sigh while dropping her shoulders. She was so uncomfortable to hear that her sister, the first princess, was looking for her, but she couldn't even argue about it. Because Elendil knew that her sister was being as considerate as possible when she conveyed her message through Terina. Yes. She thought that she could at least say hello. More than that, is Dame Terina going to come to Surin? The werewolf case seemed to be more serious than she thought. Otherwise, the security department and even the knight captain of the security department wouldn't have moved directly. If there was anything she could get from visiting Surin, then that would be a good thing. Elendil didn't think more than that about the case. What did she say? Lieutenant Lloyd, who was waiting for Terina to finish her call, asked while flashing his glasses. She said that the werewolf situation in Surin was solved by a professor. A Surin professor, you said? And she also said he is a newly appointed professor. Maybe I should meet him in person and talk face to face with him. Maybe he noticed something strange at the time. Then are you going to go there right away? Terina shook her head at Lloyd's question. The investigation in Leathervelk is not over yet. Ainz, do you have anything special to report? Yes. Ainz, who was standing by, responded energetically. I'm certain that the burned-out factory zone was a secret laboratory that studied or developed something. The important thing is who was there and what was going on in that place. That's still, other than that? Other than that, there seems to be nothing but the recent chaos in Leathervelk's underworld. It wasn't only a day or two that the underworld was in chaos. Knights were the ones on the stage who received everyone's attention, but those in the security department were different. Since they had been moving so secretly and seeing so many dirty things, they had a deeper connection with the underworld than with the normal route. In fact, the place where they got the most information about the incident was the underworld. Ainz continued the report after a slight pause at Terina's words. Well, I heard that something unusual happened this time. Something unusual. There's a group that dominated the underworld of Leathervelk called the Crimson Society. Do you know about them? I heard about them. They're quite a bother, but I didn't feel the need to get rid of them directly, so I just let them be. I remember that their scale was quite large. Yes, recently that Crimson Society was destroyed and disappeared within a day. A day. The darkness that existed behind the city. It would not be surprising to hear that someone was dead, because there were all kinds of organizations fighting there. It also had something to do with the news that some organizations had suddenly been cut off. However, the Crimson Society couldn't just be called some organization. They were the organization that dominated the underworld of Leathervelk. Since Ainz said that such an organization had disappeared overnight, even Terina had to be curious. That's a little interesting. Do you think it's related to this case? Oh, I don't think so. However, I think it would be better to keep a close eye on Leathervelk's underworld for now because it seems that a quite great and talented group of people has shown up there. They might pose a threat to the Empire. She didn't know how many people did it, but seeing that the Crimson Society was eliminated overnight, there must be a lot of talented people involved in it. Knights? Or were wizards involved in it? Only God knew if they had any ill intentions. Terina shook her head contrary to Ainz's concern. No. It's fine. We're currently still too busy, so you don't have to worry about that. We should be more focused on the investigation we're on right now. Ah, yes. Once it's confirmed that there's nothing more to look for in Leathervelk, we will head straight to Surin. Understood. Terina, who was left alone after the lieutenant stepped down, tapped her arm with her fingers as she folded her arms. Surin. Although she did not speak about it to her lieutenants, Terina had been paying keen attention to Surin ever since she had spoken to the princess not long before. She had a vague conviction that there might be a definite clue to the case in Surin. It was just a hunch, so she didn't bother to tell her lieutenants, but considering that she was a knight in the captain position, even such a hunch was enough to be an indicator. Even though I'll have to go there to see the details myself, there would certainly be something in that place. Her instincts kept telling her that even after the principal told me about the omnipotent stone. Rumors still circulated in Surin about the stone that granted wishes. No, it was much worse than before. Somebody's behind the scenes trying to stir up rumors. It was difficult to identify exactly who they were. The people who were living in the huge territory of Surin reached thousands. Although it was named an academy, it was basically a small city, so it was practically impossible to identify all the people here. Even the place where the rumors spread was called the Akashic Records, which could only be used by the students, and it was difficult to find the source because the security for their anonymity was thorough. I'd rather get rid of the omnipotent stone quickly and get the incident over with it. Among the students, people who said, "Shall we look for the stone?" began to appear one by one. Did they not realize anything from the last werewolf incident? Or did they think that that case was different? More and more students became distracted from their studies and focused on strange rumors. I'm just letting them be because there's no one crossing the line yet, but that won't last long either. They were told to stay inside during the werewolf crisis, but the people who went outside chose to catch the werewolves. Come and read on our website, Wuxia World site. Thanks, but honestly, I wasn't in a position to say anything about the omnipotent stone. Finding the stone didn't mean that anyone would get hurt because of it. Rather, if I tried to prevent them even more, the students might be more suspicious of the existence of the omnipotent stone. Never mind. The principal will take care of this anyway. Just as a student had their duty as a student, I, as a professor, also had my duty as a professor. And my duty as a professor was to teach my classes well, after all. Now, focus. As I was conducting the class as usual, their attention was drawn toward me when I spoke with a little strength in my tone. However, I didn't feel the same enthusiasm as at the beginning of the semester. I thought I knew why. The source code spell had raised their initial expectations too much. In fact, since then, I'd been teaching them what was written in the textbook and not mentioning any new magic. Among the things I taught was visualization of elements, but it seemed that it was not enough for the students who were in the age of learning. Some students were starting to complain about my class. Tap. I ended up closing the teaching material that I had in my hand with a loud noise. A lot of you seem bored, so I'll show you something fun instead of my lesson today. The students, who were about to slam their heads on their desks, raised their heads at my words. They were starting to get interested. It reminds me of the old days. There was a time when I had lived on Earth when I was also a student. I woke up at 6:30 a.m. Took the 0-hour class and studied late until 10 p.m. I spent 15 hours a day studying. I was that desperate, but there were certainly times when I couldn't stand it because I was too bored to continue my classes. At that time, teachers would always relieve the students' boredom by telling stories that were not related to classes, but when I became a teacher myself, I felt like I knew why my teachers had done that. Wizards always used the magic immediately around them. When I began to speak, the students responded as if asking what I was saying, with expressions instead of words. I continued while ignoring those reactions. Typically, elemental magic is always used while revolving the spell around the spellcaster. I said so and used the first-tier flame magic, Pyro. A small flame broke out at the tip of my finger. It was the most basic magic that any student in the class could use with their eyes closed. It was a spell that didn't even require complicated techniques, so it wasn't that surprising. But if you improve this spell a little bit, it's possible to do this as well. After removing the flame from my fingertips, I soon casted the spell again. That time it was the same first-tier flame magic, pyro. The only difference was, the flame wasn't invoked above my hands, but in a place that was quite far away from me. Whoa, A male student, who had almost been on the verge of falling asleep, screamed in amazement when he saw the flame right in front of his nose. But no one laughed at the student. Everyone's eyes were nailed to the flames floating in the air. Their reactions were all the same. What's that? It's 10 meters away, but a flame was invoked there. How did he do that? Isn't it a deception? I knew that such words would come out, so I immediately ended the pyro spell and invoked a different spell. Small sparks of electricity splashed throughout the classroom, water droplets formed, and wind swirled slightly. Their locations were all different, but I was the only one who casted the spells. Only then did the students' eyes turn to me, as they had realized there was really something special behind it. There was silence in the classroom, and it was to the point that I could hear someone swallowing their saliva. You have something you're curious about? Then, most students raised their hands. Their reactions were the opposite of the boredom that they shown me just before. I smiled inwardly and pointed at a student. Yes, what are you curious about? How on earth did you do that magic? The intent of your question is vague. At my critique, the student organized his thoughts and opened his mouth again. Normally, magic revolves around the spellcaster. It's because the magic's base material, which is mana, comes from the spellcaster. I nodded my head, because it was obvious logic and common sense. Yes, but your magic was triggered at a distance beyond common sense. Most people would be curious about that, so I decided to show it again. Now take a look at the spell. I invoked a flame on my palm. Although magic is said to be centered on the spellcaster, the magic doesn't touch my skin. Instead, it's stuck in the air 5 centimeters above my palm. But it has a certain degree of freedom. The other female student cut in the middle and said that. I didn't bother to point her out or criticize her words. I just quietly nodded my head. Yes, usually the limit is 1 meter. And according to what I just did, it's practically impossible to cast a spell from this podium that reaches the very back of the classroom. But Professor Ludger, you did that. I understood what the students were talking about. The impossible thing, a mysteriousness beyond one's understanding. That was the magic I had shown them. In the end, the principle is similar to what I'm showing you now. I got rid of the flames floating on my palm. Even though 1 meter is the limit, it's actually not impossible to go beyond that limit. It's only that the mana consumption will only be more intense. However, it is possible if you use a different principle, as I did just now. Instead of casting spells around the spellcaster, I used a method of casting spells at a distance by creating a spell at a particular coordinate. This is the Coordinate Designation Spell. Chapter 62, Coordinate Designation Spell 2. Coordinate Designation Spell. With the advent of the new spell, although the students did not let screams out of their mouths, their eyes were already on the verge of popping out, just like an active volcano that burned hot after a long slumber. Whoa, oh my God. In the meantime, there was a student who purely admired the emergence of new magic with an envious eye. It was Aiden. Leo, did you see that? As expected from Professor Ludger, I can't believe he invented such magic. Leo. When Leo, who should have usually answered him, didn't say a word, Aiden shook Leo's shoulder. Leo, are you okay? Oh, yeah. Why are you like that? You're just spacing out, so unlike you. Aiden, do you know how awesome that spell is? Yeah, why? It's great, but is it something surprising? Never mind. Leo sighed and shook his head. Sometimes he thought of how comfortable it would be to be in a position like Aiden's, who didn't know anything. Because Leo knew a lot, it was hard for him to gather his senses together with the groundbreaking magic that Ludger had just shown. A spell that goes beyond space. What on earth is that professor's real identity? Leo had no choice but to be suspicious of Ludger's identity. Just like Leo, there were some other students who were surprised to see Ludger's magic. The more one knew about something, the more they were able to see things. One of the prime examples of that was Flora Lumos. What? Flora almost let go of her sanity for a moment because of the sweet scent that lingered strongly at the tip of her nose. It wasn't only that. Colors appeared in a complex manner in front of her, and it felt like her vision was paralyzed. Magic synesthesia, her natural gift that she was born with, was confusing her at that moment. I've never seen it before, such magic. Although she had never heard or learned about such magic, Ludger's spell was just as unique as that. So far, the magic she had felt with her synesthesia had always seemed to be like looking at a painting in a frame to her. She could tell how well a spell was created just by looking at it. But the magic that Ludger used right then was different. If she had to express it, it felt like she was at the center of a fireworks show rather than looking at the artwork itself. Firecrackers exploded everywhere, and the colorful lights made her eyes dizzy. Flora had a hard time staying sane. Where on earth does that magic? Flora closed her eyes tightly without realizing it, but then she felt some regret because of it. Just a little. She wanted to see that magic just a little more. She wanted to feel that sense and pleasure again. With that thought, she repeatedly opened her eyes and closed them again due to excessive stimulation. Elendil, the princess, also stared at Ludger's magic with a stiff face, and Lynn, who was sitting next to her, shed pure admiration. Julia Plumhart showed her usual expression, but her squinty eyes were much sharper than usual. Ludger stopped his spells, as he had attracted the attention of all the students. "What do you think? Does it pique your interest?" With the advent of a spell that went beyond space, the students could not answer Ludger's questions. They still looked like they were dreaming, and they were just stuck in dazes as they recalled what they had seen. Ludger opened his mouth again. "It may be quite a wondrous and surprising magic for all of you, but it also plays a very small part in this vast world because it's just a little bit of a modification in spell casting." "That was just a little bit of a modification," he said. The students had no choice but to doubt their ears at Ludger's words for a moment. But Ludger was being serious. The coordinate designation spell that he used was nothing compared to the real magic that he usually knew. "This spell that I used is also something that's simply inspired by a wizard's spell." "Oh my God! Is that for real?" Ludger nodded his head to the students' questions. He didn't have to lie or brag about that kind of magic. There are still a lot more undiscovered magics in this world. Anyone here can create and develop their own magic as well. His words made it seem easy, but none of the students looked down on Ludger's spell. Even if they felt inspired by it, changing the spell into their own magic was another level. Of course, I didn't show this spell to teach you about this. Ludger's words made some students shed some regretful exclamations. Since it was a new spell that he showed after the source code, they had a little bit of expectation about it. "No matter how generous I am, I can't share all of my knowledge. Just be satisfied with what I show you." "Are you not going to tell us about the principle?" "Yes, if you're curious, think about it yourself and analyze it. Then why did you show it to us?" "Because I want you to see this and realize something." Some students looked at him as if asking why he showed something he wouldn't teach them, but Ludger also had his own intentions. "I also made this magic based on the inspiration of someone else's magic. After all, magic isn't all about your own pure creative work. It was definitely a magic that was born anew by imitating someone's magic. Because it was so hard and practically impossible to create magic purely from scratch. That was why Ludger had shown his magic to the students. Don't try to understand magic as something that's too difficult and complicated. Of course, if you dig really deep, you'll feel dizzy enough to have a headache, but sometimes you will look at magic in a simple way." Ludger's words awakened the students' spirits. Ludger showed that magic just then to evoke the mindset of the students who were tired of his boring class, an enthusiasm for new magic, and his advice that anyone could do it. Of course, there will be some students who are purely curious about the spell that I casted, and some students must have already been analyzing the spell. There were many people who were stabbed by Ludger's words, and they shuddered. So if you're curious, focus on the class. What you need to completely integrate the enlightenment you've learned from the magic that you saw into your own magic is, above all else, a solid foundation. Solid foundation. Is that for real? Those who have a good foundation can analyze and use magic properly when they want it in the future. I guarantee you. In some ways, it was really just lip service. But it was also true that the weight of those obvious and natural words became different depending on who said them. Come and read on our website Wuxia World site. Thanks, some students who thought that it was just a boring class without much to learn had no choice but to reflect on their attitude. And if I have to give you a hint, this coordinate designation spell has the concept of space. Perceive space while focusing on yourselves and figure out how to send your mana there. Is that our homework? Someone raised her hand and asked. It was Flora Lumos, who still couldn't get out of the magic shock given to her by Ludger. Ludger stared at her for a moment and nodded with a blank face. You can think of it like that. If you can look at my magic and analyze it and then vaguely imitate it, it's proof that you followed my instructions well. She was asking just in case, but she didn't expect him to answer so seriously. Flora was at a loss. If you think you've mastered this magic, you can come and show me. If you do that, I'll give you award points. A lot of them, too. His last words were enough to inspire the students' subdued motivation. Today's class ends here. Everyone seems quite tired, so I won't give you homework today. I think the spell I showed you is already enough for your homework. Whoa-ah! Students raised their hands and cheered when they heard there was no homework. For students who took multiple classes every week, it was a reality that every bit of homework in each class was very heavy for them. Professor Ludger was stern and thorough, but he was really good in that part. The students, who were already excited to hear that there was no homework, chatted among themselves. Then you should prepare and review your lessons thoroughly until the next class. Today's lesson ends here. Yes, you have worked hard. Ludger nodded and left the classroom at the students' loud answers. As I was back in the professor's room after class, I flopped down in my designated seat. Sedna, who was only peeking at me, approached me gently. Professor? That's fine, just go back. Pardon. Today's work is done, so you can go back and rest. Ah, yes. I guess she was worried because I looked a little tired. It was a relationship that was only beneficial to one side, but she was still cute whenever I looked at her. But I was more comfortable being alone right then. Sedna answered in a small voice as she could not resist my orders and left the professor's office. After I was left completely alone, I was absent-minded for a moment before picking up a professor-only crystal ball on the table. It's time for the omnipotent stone talks to come out. Omnipotent stone. The relic was the source of rumors that had heated up Surin. The principal had said she would leave the omnipotent stone in the temporary storage area before bringing it back to its original place. And in the process of that, she said she needed my help. According to her words, the process itself didn't seem to take that long, so it was time for the principal to contact me. Beep, speaking of the devil. As I was looking at the crystal ball that was sending a signal, I immediately activated it. Yes, Your Honor, Professor Ludger. There's a big problem. Big problem. The principal's voice, contrary to my expectations, was quite seriously subdued, naturally. I also straightened up my posture and waited for her next words. Is something happening? The omnipotent stone was stolen. No way, even I hadn't expected it to happen before the stone was even moved yet. I organized my thoughts for a moment and spoke in a careful tone. What exactly happened? I looked down on the enemies too much. What do you mean? They've dug more deeply into Surin than I thought. As I was listening to her sentence afterwards, I understood why the principal was talking like that. I had heard that the incident related to the omnipotent stone was a top secret known to very few people. Although I thought it would be all right if I quickly brought the stone back to its original location, even if the rumor had spread outside. I didn't know it was a mistake. The enemy already knew the location of the reserved storage place, and the principal said that they snatched it first before the principal tried to implement her plan that night. The unidentified assailants who had stolen the omnipotent stone were hiding inside Surin. I heard that a manhunt party was quickly formed to chase them, but we didn't know when they would be caught. More than anything, if they use the omnipotent stone, things will get out of hand. That's for sure. I didn't know how much power the omnipotent stone had, but since it was a relic, It was undeniable that the stone was a very dangerous object. What if the person who had the omnipotent stone accidentally ordered things to go out of control? There might have ended up being enormous casualties. But even so, it didn't make sense to declare an emergency to the entirety of Surin. Was there any reason to panic the students? Furthermore, announcing that fact might damage Surin's reputation. There was already a lot of talk about the werewolf crisis, so we couldn't cause more crises there. In the end, it was a time fight that required us to put out the flames before they had completely spread. What do you think is the golden time? It's until midnight today. I see. Understood. You won't ask me anything more than that. It would be better to move right away rather than asking you questions. I said those words and hung up the call with the principal. I couldn't act like a stranger to things that might get me involved. If someone used the relic incorrectly, it could be a dangerous weapon powerful enough to blow up a city, and there was no guarantee that the aftermath to that wouldn't affect me. If I ran from there irresponsibly, I would also be accused of being an accomplice without being able to completely clear the principal's suspicions. It was beyond control as long as I had already put my real face on it. Fee. I sighed and released the sound barrier that I had set before I spoke to the principal. Sedna. I called her in a low voice and felt a sense of presence from someone who got startled beyond the door. I had known for a while that she hadn't left yet and had been hanging about in front of the door. Come in. It was a good thing, because I needed to gather some information. Chapter 63, The Pursuit of Shadow 1. Sedna Rachin was hanging about in front of Ludger because she had to tell him something. That was why she didn't leave after Ludger told her to go and instead hung around the door, and it was fortunate for both of them. It seems like the subordinates are doing their own thing as they please. Ah, that? Yes. Sedna tried to explain something in Ludger's words, but she immediately nodded when she realized she didn't have to do it. Just as Ludger said, it was an undeniable fact that they had done things as they pleased. What exactly happened? 1 second order, no. Someone tried to take care of things without any superior's order. Explain it from the beginning. Ludger's ferocious voice made Sedna's thin body shudder, but it was not a frightened response. It was a thrill. Because her gaze was stuck on Ludger's face, who was staring at her intensely. It started with a third order asking for information. He was gathering information about some of the employees he had handled while hiding in Surin, and he realized that one of them had made contact with the source of the rumor. A stone that made wishes come true. I'd pass it by, saying it was just an absurd rumor that would be common in an academy of witchcraft and wizardry if I had simply heard it from someone. The third order had listened to that information as if they were attracted to it. That's how they found out the truth that somewhere in Surin, a fairly powerful artifact is secretly kept. And the report must have gone up. Yes, you are right. The third order informed their superior, the second order, about this fact, and the one who received the report didn't report to the people above them. Yes, it was not a strange thing to inform the first order of something as great as a relic. However, the second order cut off and concealed the information on his part, and he did things as he pleased. Did they think I wouldn't know about it? Sedna responded hastily to Ludger's voice that even seemed a little angry. That, I also don't really. Who's this second order? It's someone named Demeyers. Ludger tapped his chin and made a gesture for Sedna to say more. He is a member of the second order who is closely related to the information department and was in charge of their work. However, he wasn't as good as his own greed. What do you think is the reason behind why Demeyers did this? It's hard to judge, but I think that probably he wants to make a big contribution and move up to the first order position. First order position? Yes. The founder of our Black Dawn Society, the Zero Order, created the first order position for 7 people, and that position can be changed at any time. When the story of the First Order came out, Sedna was unconsciously excited. The First Order had nothing short of her admiration. It was the same for the man in front of her. The First Orders are now firmly protecting their position, but there are not just a few Second Orders who are eager to take over their positions. I see. Ludger shook his head and clicked his tongue as he was thinking about the Black Dawn society system. He already thought that they were notoriously cruel people who brutally dealt with traitors, but he didn't think there would be another harsh rule inside the organization. Does that mean that a person who is abandoned or can't handle things properly will lose their seat? It meant that the current First Orders might have been there by taking over someone else's positions. But what he was most curious about was the existence of Zero Order, the founder of the organization. Who the hell were they to make that crazy rule? I'm sure they won't lose their position. There was a basis for that conviction. And the obvious reason was also that he was certain of the Zero Order's power. He didn't know what kind of guy they were, but Zero Order was the most important person he needed to be careful about. So how's the current situation? Well, it seems that Demeyers did it by calling the other Third Orders who agreed with him. Before the artifact was moved, he stormed the storage area, seized it, and is now on the run. His location? Judging from the situation, he just figured out how to escape. Other than that, So he still hasn't escaped Surin? Yes. Ludger brushed his chin lightly with his hand. Sedna hadn't checked Demeyers' whereabouts thoroughly, so it must have been that urgent for her to inform Ludger first. Considering the time the principal contacted him, it meant that it hadn't been long since the incident had taken place. However, considering that the principal needed his help, Demeyers must have been good at running away because he was a member of a secret society. Is it a game of hide-and-seek? Pardon? No, I'm just talking to myself? Ah, yes. Ludger turned his head and looked out the window. It was time for the sun to set and the sunset to start burning. Spring was not over yet, so the daytime was not long. The darkness of the night would cover the surroundings early on. That would further interfere with his pursuit. It was the time when the one who was being chased would slow down and the one who was chasing would feel some extent of relief. That was his time to step up. I need to move right now. That? Fine, no, Professor. Are you going to move on your own? Of course. I have to deal with them before things get any worse. What should I do then? Sedna gathered her courage and asked so. If Ludger said he was stepping up and she didn't do anything, it would be uncomfortable for her. Besides, wasn't all she had been doing bringing in information? She couldn't say that she was working by only doing that kind of thing. Nothing. Pardon? Sedna, you've done your part sufficiently just by telling me about this. Me? She did her part sufficiently. Sedna didn't know that would come out of Ludger's mouth. No, it was questionable whether she had ever heard such a compliment properly in her life. Are you sure about those words? Yes, Ludger replied without the slightest hint of doubt. You did a good job. Sedna felt a lump in her throat at those words. It was the first time that she was being acknowledged by someone else. She was always treated like trash. That was why she had tried to run away from her family. But no one welcomed her after she had fled from that place. She had thought many times that maybe she was at her limit. But Ludger had acknowledged her. Her eyes became red, and it felt like tears were going to flow from there, but she desperately held it in. She couldn't show such an ugly face in front of the person she admired the most. Flutter. Ludger took his black long coat from the hanger. I will go now. I'll leave the rest to you. Come and read on our website, Wuxia World site. Thanks. He said that as he passed by Sedna, who bowed her head while desperately holding back her tears. It was no wonder she was hurt by the indifference that he showed when he seemed not to care about her. Sedna knew that it was because of her own feelings towards him. No, I just said a few words. What was wrong with her? I shook my head while thinking of Sedna, who was left alone in the professor's room. I had just said a few words to make her feel better, but I couldn't believe she was crying on her own. I didn't understand her, but I thought it might be because she went through such hardships. She was trying hard to pretend to be strong, but it was just a shell to hide the fragile part inside her. Is it the Rachin family? I had also heard of the Rachin family, although it was not quite right to call it recently. It was undeniable that the family had an emerging power among prestigious families. However, a lot of rumors came out from their family too. It was not well known, but I was sure the family had grown in all sorts of dirty ways. If I had to put a grade on their evil deeds, they would be as bad as Belfort Rickson, who died by my own hands directly. Perhaps the Rachin family was much worse off than him. However, it has nothing to do with me now. That was obviously Sedna's personal business, her hatred of her family, and her connection to Julia Plumhart. It had nothing to do with me. She played the role of my assistant recently, but our relationship was nothing but a shell in the end. I didn't have to devote myself to paying attention to it. I guess there's something else more important than that. My priority is to find the stolen relic, the omnipotent stone. Once I heard where the other Black Dawn Society members fled to, there was no problem in chasing them. Even though Surin was so wide and had a lot of spaces to hide, that didn't mean I would never find them. Coming out of the building, I slowly walked down the street and looked up at the sky. Time was going slowly. When the sun had completely disappeared beyond the western horizon, the light disappeared without a trace, and coldness was mixed in the wind. When my surroundings became dim, I began to hear the noise of grass bugs one by one. Stop. I stopped my footsteps. I looked around, but I couldn't see anyone. No, there were actually students leaving school one by one or people walking around chatting among themselves, but it was true that no one was interested in me. Well, it was because I was already perfectly assimilated with my surroundings. Ater Nocturnus. The black shadow that covered my body was swaying and hid my existence from the surrounding scenery. It was my original magic called Black Nocturne in Latin. Unusually, however, unlike its appearance, that magic was not a dark attribute elemental magic. It wasn't even the spellcasting type of magic that I taught the students. To be exact, it was a summoning type magic. One of the 5 magic affiliations, summoning magic. There were 4 specialties in this summoning magic: spirit, which followed the will of nature, golems that were made of metal and earth, creed that invoked and applied the remaining will of the soul, and the last one was the magic beast I was using. All wizards dealt with mana, and that mana was a mysterious power that had not yet been properly defined. When a person dealt with that mysterious power, the mana itself was affected by the person's tendency. Whether it was their body type, living experiences, the spellcaster's wishes, or hidden talents, it didn't matter what it was. All of those elements were woven into one, and the mana itself had its own will and had a shape as a summoned beast. That was a magic beast. The magic beasts, which had different forms and abilities, were in a different track from ordinary living things. Even the magic beast I was handling right then was taking the form of clothes rather than a normal summoned beast, and its role was also heterogeneous. Let's go. See, Yuak. The shadow at the end of my coat flowed like ink that was dropped in the water and moved on the ground. Soon, a shadow that was clearer than the darkness laid like a carpet on the ground, creating a road. I moved along the path that it led me to. Huh, what's wrong? No. It seems like there was something passing by just now. I didn't feel it, though. Was it bird? No one that I encountered in the dark could recognize me. They couldn't even recognize my existence. It was one of the abilities that my magic beast, Ater Nocturnus, possessed. It devoured and got rid of the abstract power called the existence of its summoner. It did not just hide its summoner, so it showed great performance that let its summoner conduct a magical search without even getting caught. However, it could not be used for a long time. Because my presence was being eaten, if I wore it for a long time, it would devour my existence. Esraak. I took the pills out of my pocket and put them in my mouth. I would not be able to use it for long because of its extreme consumption of mana. Because even though it followed my order well, it didn't listen to me all the time. It followed me because I fed it like that, or else it would eat me at any time. Every magic that I use is missing some screws. As I was teaching the basics after coming to Surin, I realized that fact even more. Still, I had no choice but to use it. I kept moving in the dark while thinking so. Huh, Flora, what's wrong? After finishing the day's study, Flora Lumos stopped in her spot while walking along the street with her childhood friend, Cheryl. Cheryl was confused at Flora's sudden action, but Flora didn't answer her. Just now, something passed by me. It couldn't be seen with her eyes. It couldn't be felt with her skin either. If it were someone else, they would have mistaken it for wind. But Flora wasn't like that. There's a scent. A strong scent came toward her and then moved away from her again. It wasn't a mere scent. It was definitely a magic scent. If the usual magic scent was sweet and stimulating, the scent of magic just then was a little darker and deeper, like black coffee full of flavor. What on earth was that? A magic that can't be seen by my eyes. Even the fact that the magic passed by her, Flora was curious, even though her pride was slightly hurt by her curiosity. The scent still remains. The reverberation of that scent still remained like a path. Let's go. Flora thought so and immediately took action. Flora? Flora? Cheryl Wagner anxiously called out to Flora because of her weird behavior. Chapter 64, The Pursuit of Shadow 2. Before I knew it, the sun was completely gone and night had come. I headed to the depths of the forest that the students couldn't reach. Inside that forest, the members of the Black Dawn Society who had stolen the omnipotent stone were hiding. Whisper. Surin's guards who were chasing after the members were seen near the entrance to the forest, but they were guarding the outside of the forest without going into it. I easily broke through the loose part of their security. They didn't recognize my shadowy existence. There are a lot of dense forests here, maybe because it's Surin. There were 3 major forests inside Surin's land. The first one was the secret forest, where no living beings ever lived. The second one was the silent forest, where all sorts of eerie events and bizarre psychic phenomena occurred. The third one was the forest of fantasy dream, where all kinds of spirits and supernatural phenomena existed with enormous vitality. The forest itself was a prohibited area that went back and forth between danger rank 2 and 3. It was indeed surprising that such a place existed inside the Academy's land, but it was even more surprising to know that the Academy let those forests be. I can't consider the sense of safety of people in this world the same as those who lived on the Earth in the 21st century, but I can't help my inability to understand it. I thought I was quite used to living there, but I still couldn't help feeling the gap from my past life. In any case, there were 3 places designated as dangerous areas that were simply considered as forests inside Surin. Among them was the Silent Forest, which was the place where the men who stole the omnipotent stone ran away to. A forest full of evil hands and powerful, wicked minds that were designated as dangerous entities. It was said that the land was used as a cemetery before the foundation of Surin. The corpses and death, which had been accumulated in the cemetery for a long time, had spread to become a supernatural phenomenon of the magic sort since Surin's establishment. That was how that distorted forest was established. If someone entered the forest mistakenly, they would be possessed by the vengeful spirits and become lost, or they would be covered by wicked minds and forced to become something completely different. It was a place where one had no choice but to witness disaster fall on a person with weak mana or mental power if they entered the forest. That was why it was called the Silent Forest, because the people who went into it would disappear without any sound or news. They managed to maintain this kind of forest, I see. It was what I said, but in fact, Surin had taken measurements a few times regarding the Silent Forest. It seemed that some of the principals in the past had argued that the forest should be disposed of due to its danger. Nevertheless, there was only one reason why the Silent Forest still remained. It was because all of the disposal efforts had failed. When they cut down the trees, they will grow again the next day. It was said that some people who had cut down the trees even went crazy or became idiots. Even the wizards who had strong mana suffered from nervous breakdowns and nightmares. However, even when they tried to set the forest on fire, the forest did not burn down, as it seemingly had its own will. Many principals had no other choice but to get rid of their goals of removing the Silent Forest. In the end, all they could choose to do was impose a ban on entering the forest itself. But the Silent Forest has its own boundaries as if it had drawn a line by itself. If the trespassers don't cross that line, they will bear no ill effects from entering the forest. It didn't matter if they kept staring at the Silent Forest beyond its boundary. They would be all right as long as they didn't go into the forest. The problem was that those guys were inside the Silent Forest. Even if the rumors of the forest are exaggerated, there must be a danger to the Silent Forest itself. Do they have the confidence to go there, or were they forced to flee there? I paused my steps while letting out a sigh. I had also been inside the silent forest for quite a while. There were voices of unidentified insects and beasts, and even the voice of someone sobbing. Die, 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 hicks, hicks, hicks. I hate it. I despise it. Please help me. Someone, please get me out of here. Those voices kept ringing in my head, but I didn't mind them because I had been going through worse things than those voices all the time. Now that I had come that far, it would be all right for me to lift the magic. I immediately released Aether Nocturnus and poured mana pills into my mouth. Are they around here? Dim, vengeful spirits flew around me in the air, but they didn't approach me or do me any direct harm. Rather, the spirits peeked at me secretly and were busy running away with strange screams. I ignored those vengeful spirits and searched for the traces of the secret society members who had fled. I found them. There were footprints on the damp ground. They numbered around 5 people. Their number is unexpectedly small. I heard that there were at least 10 of them, though. The rest of them were either killed while running away or were caught in the hands of their pursuers before they could evacuate. In other words, those 5 people who succeeded in escaping were the ones with the most proper skills. I kept moving along the tracks. The forest was dark because there was no light, and even the night fog made it so I could not properly distinguish the direction I was headed. But it didn't really matter to me. I followed the traces of the ground with unshakable steps and headed deeper into the forest. Those people standing by outside. Right now, they'll only stand by at the entrance to the forest, but if enough of their people gather, they'll begin to go straight into the forest. So before that, I had to finish the portion of my work. Not as the Professor Ludger Chelosy, but as John Doe, the First Order of the Black Dawn Society. Chatter. As I continued to walk, I stopped at the voices coming from beyond the hazy fog. I naturally eliminated my presence. Those voices were not made by vengeful or wicked spirits. Conversations. Walking along the trail, I finally reached my destination. Fee, Mr. Demyers, what should we do now? There's a tracking party outside the forest right now. Right. In addition, just by staying still in this forest, our sanity keeps getting consumed. We can't continue on if we keep being like this. Just shut up. Demyers, who had been keeping his mouth shut, screamed at the complaints of the Third Orders. I have a plan, so stop talking nonsense and just follow along properly. The Third Orders shut their mouths at Demyers's half-threatening words. But their anxiety was not something to be resolved with just a few words. Because one of their colleagues who had already entered here went mad because he couldn't stand the magic power of the silent forest. They couldn't afford to help him either, so they had thrown him away in the middle of the forest, and they didn't even want to imagine what had happened to him. Damn it. If the tracking party comes in, aren't all of us going to die without being able to escape? The Third Orders had the same thought in their minds. They had been believing everything Demyers, the Second Order, had said without question and following him. But they must have sensed that things had already gone awry from there. Demyers had acted without telling any First Orders about it, with the irresponsible words that he would take responsibility for everything. There are 2 First Orders in Surin right now. No matter how he's the Second Order, can he really sort this out? I don't even see any way to survive in the first place. Everyone closed their mouths and only rolled their eyes. Come and read on our website, Wuxia World Site. Thanks, in fact. Demyers also felt uneasy. It was good that he did it at first, but honestly, he didn't care much about the aftermath. Damn it. They said it's an omnipotent stone, but it's not worth anything. Demyers looked down at the fist-sized stone in his right hand. It was the omnipotent stone that had made him confident in his plan. The stone that was wrapped up in cloth was emitting mysterious power just from being held in his hand. But that was all. The omnipotent stone itself was emitting powerful force, but it never granted any wish. I trusted the power of this stone and did this thing. Demyers felt like he was on the edge of a cliff. It was his original plan to make a wish on the stone there to gain strong power and to rise to a higher position. That was why he had even kept it a secret from the First Orders. Damn it. How do I use it? The force flowing out of the stone was obviously real, but the force was something else that didn't mix with the mana he dealt with. It played a perfectly separate role, like water and oil. As a result, Demeyers had no idea how to deal with that force. Even if he made a wish earnestly in his heart, the stone was silent. Even if he stroked the stone with his hands or spilled his mana into it, it wouldn't budge. At that point, it was nothing more than a pretty and powerful mana stone. S-Rock, there was a sudden sound of footsteps on the grass. The members of the Black Dawn Society, who were surprised, were all nervous and stared at the place where the sound had come from. "Who is it?" It was when Demeyers stepped up and shouted like that a man dressed in black appeared in the dark. Is he an enemy? It was when everyone thought so and aimed at him with their wands and weapons at him. Is this everyone? The members of the Black Dawn Society unconsciously flinched at his sharp voice that was full of irritation. It was some kind of reflex. They wondered why they were like that, but at the same time they were bound to realize who the man was. You managed to run away without getting too far, I see. Still, you're members of the Black Dawn Society, huh? Why you are. Demeyers, whose eyes had become accustomed to the dark, recognized the man's face and hardened his expression. First Order, Mr. John Doe. Oh, it's really him. The rest of the members also recognized Ludger and knelt down in front of him with pale faces. Demeyers also bit his lips tightly and bowed his head. Ludger nodded satisfactorily at their sharp response. Demeyers slowly raised his head and managed to move his lips. What kind of business does Mr. John Doe have here? Second Order Demeyers. Yes, Mr. First Order. Why do you think I'm here? Ludger's question forced Demeyers to shut his mouth. Why was the First Order here? Demeyers had only received a question back instead. No way, does he know everything? There was only one reason why the First Order, who was hiding in the professor's position, had come to that place. It was to hold them accountable for causing the incident. Demeyers quickly racked his brain. His opponent was an executive of which there were only 7 members of in the organization of the Black Dawn Society. There was no way that position could have been gained simply by personal connection or luck. It must have been because he had the skills to match the position. Even the man with the code name John Doe was famous for having a trashy personality. A man who even killed fellow members of the Black Dawn Society when things went awry. The man was a symbol of fear from the perspective of the lower members. The reason why he didn't get scolded by the Zero Order for doing so must be because there's something that he has that makes him able to keep his position that firmly. Such a First Order was holding him accountable. Then what should he do? No, there were a lot of tracking parties out there in the first place, so how did John Doe get there? Demeyers had complicated thoughts. You're racking your brain, I see. That? Demeyers' mind went blank at Ludger's voice, who spoke as if he was seemingly piercing through him. He was bound to rack his brain hard as he had gotten to that situation. He raised his trembling hand. He politely held the omnipotent stone previously gripped in his right hand with both of his hands. He politely offered it to Ludger. And he recited the most optimal words to be spoken there, which were chosen by his instinct. This is the relic called the Omnipotent Stone. Yeah, I offer this to Mr. First Order. He didn't say any lame excuses of why he did that to obtain the stone. He was just offering the item that he desperately obtained, as if he was offering it as a tribute to his superior Ludger. It definitely hurt his pride, and he thought it might be better to cause a mutiny right away. However, Demeyers wasn't like that. Ludger didn't give any answer for a long time. The rest of the men's lips dried due to his silence. It was after 10 seconds, which seemed like 10 years, had passed. Rather than opening his mouth, Ludger showed his action instead. He took the omnipotent stone that Demeyers handed to him. All right. The men, who were very nervous, became extremely relieved at his words and loosened their bodies. Because of that, they failed to respond properly to Ludger's next words. And farewell. Pardon, what does that? Shoot. The darkness of the ground fluttered, and soon, thorns popped out and penetrated everyone, holding them in their places. Demeyers stared at Ludger with incredulous eyes. His pouting mouth was about to say, "Why the hell?" However, Ludger only looked down at him with a cold stare that held no emotion and gave him no answer. Drop. The corpses whose vital points had been pierced rolled around the ground. Ludger had no intention of keeping them alive in the first place. If he kept them alive and they stepped on his tail, his position would be in danger. It was better to shut them up forever in that silent forest. Is this the omnipotent stone? Ludger untangled the cloth that covered the stone. Ludger's eyes turned sharp when he saw a dark green emerald stone. His usually expressionless face frowned very slightly. Chapter 65, A Witch's Trap. 1. I had actually seen relics, and I had a fragment of relic. I couldn't say that all relics were all the same, but I still knew why it was called a relic, so I could be sure. This omnipotent stone was not a relic. The principal told me that someone had stolen the omnipotent stone, and she said that the stone was a relic. But the omnipotent stone that I held in reality wasn't like the relics that I knew of. It was just a stone that possessed a lot of magic power. At that moment, I was bound to assume the worst. Shiver, and at the same time, an eerie sensation flowed down my spine. The silent forest was not worthy of its name, as countless vengeful and wicked spirits wandered around and wept. Sometimes, mutated beasts or spiritual beasts also roamed around. But at some point, all the sounds were snapped off. It suited the name of silent forest. My surroundings became quiet. I looked up at the sky, far above the dense, gray coniferous forest. Underneath the sky that was hidden by the clouds of the night sky, something was floating. It was far away, but I saw it clearly, and even the fact that it was gradually gathering power and light. I immediately invoked my mana. At the same time, I summoned the magical beast of Aether Nocturnus and quickly wrapped it around my body. Wearer. A shadow that was similar to a black cloth wrapped around me like I was a mummy. At the same time, a star fell from the sky. Boo-woo-woo-um. A white and dazzling explosion occurred in the center of the silent forest. The white light that burned through the darkness spread in the form of a huge dome and reached the edge of the forest. A huge storm struck the forest, and debris from branches and stone splinters splashed everywhere. The white dome, which was spreading as if to devour the entire silent forest, soon stopped its explosive expansion and slowly disappeared. Shah! There was nothing left in the place where the light had been. The trees that formed the silent forest, the wicked spirits that were floating in the air, and the spiritual beasts who were eroded by the forest's energy, because they had also stepped down in fear and awe of one being. That's the end. The clouds lifted and the moonlight fell from the sky. Her white hair shone faintly in the moonlight. Principal Alyssa Willow. She descended from the sky and landed in the center of the ruins she had created. It was a terrifying view, as if a star had fallen from the sky. There was only one thing that was left in shape where everything was gone. And I brought the fake omnipotent stone. The principal muttered so and looked around. At the same time, she lightly scattered her mana, but nothing was caught. In other words, she had dealt with the guys who were hiding within Surin in a single blow. It was all thanks to the bait, which had the name of the omnipotent stone. I wanted to catch bigger fish, but I can't hope for it. The principal shook her head lightly from side to side. She didn't want to stay there for long. Thanks to the high-tier spell that she used a while ago, the surrounding area had become quiet, but the silent forest would fill the ruins back into its own space. I wish I could completely erase this forest. No matter how she was a high-ranking wizard, she was not enough to destroy that forest alone. But if someone entered the silent forest with their poor skills, they would become crazy due to the magic power of the forest. It was annoying, but she had no choice but to leave it alone. I can just say to the other people that I've taken care of it properly. Alyssa deliberately asked the other professors for help in order to deal with the matter in secret. Ludger Chelosy was a representative example. She had asked him for help because he seemed competent, but she still had suspicions on him that she had yet to erase. She had thoughts that maybe Ludger had even been in that place. How did he end up in the end? The magic she used was not easily blocked, even by a wizard of the same rank. Moreover, it was more like a surprise attack, so it was even more impossible to avoid. Even if they were a wizard, they couldn't escape death if they got caught there. If Ludger was there, he would also be dead. I wish that's not the case. It was a personal admiration. She wished that at least a man that great was not a traitor to Surin. Alyssa thought so and flew back up into the sky while carrying her bait. To be honest, I was surprised. Ludger, who had confirmed that the principal left her position from a faraway place, wiped off the cold sweat flowing on his forehead. I didn't expect the principal herself to come forward. It would have been a disaster if I had been even the slightest bit late in reacting. The magic that was used by the principal. It had been an explosion of light, as if a meteorite had been dropped. The sight that seemed like a missile exploded and blew up the whole forest made his skin crawl, even though it was far away from him. Was that the magic of a sixth-rank wizard? Ludger couldn't believe he had been there a little while ago. He had managed to escape thanks to the Aether Nocturnus that he used. It's a good thing I set the coordinates in advance. There was no teleportation magic in this world. No, it would be right to say that the magic actually existed, but there was none of it that was known externally. That was also why the students were surprised by Ludger's coordinate designation spell in the middle of his lecture. It was astonishing to them that magic could be expressed beyond space. Even when the magic itself was like that, it was also impossible according to people's common sense for spellcasters to teleport through space. Although in fantasy novels that often existed in his past life, there was a magic called blink or teleport. There was no such magic in this world. But Ludger had used that. His method was simple. It was because of the characteristics of the magical beast that he used. A magical beast was both a summoned beast and a spell in itself. Like most summoned beasts' shapes, Ludger's magical beast was an attire, and it maintained its shape by wrapping around Ludger's body. When this Aether Nocturnus was moved by a coordinate designation spell, Ludger himself also became a mechanism that moved together with it. He knew how to use the coordinate designation spell, and teleportation was possible thanks to the characteristics of Aether Nocturnus. In other words, it was a unique teleportation technique that only Ludger could use. I feel dizzy. Come and read on our website, Wuxia World site. Thanks, with a slightly trembling hand, Ludger took the pills from his inside pocket and poured them into his mouth. Only then did the tremors of his body subside as pure mana was supplied to his brain. The downside of such teleportation magic was that the number of its uses was extremely limited. Ludger suddenly remembered that the principal had asked him for help. No way was she aiming to do this. He shook his head immediately after thinking that far. Then there was no way that such a bothersome method could have been used by her. Even though she had said that she would leave it to the other professors on the surface, the case must have been very secretive for her to take care of it by herself directly. The only thing Ludger overlooked was that he had come into contact with the enemy faster than the principal had assumed would be possible for an innocent. Alyssa, the principal, must have intended to take care of things by herself and was going to tell Ludger and others later. She wouldn't think that Ludger would find the enemies before her in that silent forest, and even that omnipotent stone was fake. As expected from the leader of Surin, I can't let my guard down. Even if he was a professor in Surin, she should hide the truth from him for efficient work. Ludger's body shivered a little bit. Again, he remembered that she was an extraordinary human being. I'll have to be more careful to not get caught. If the principal found out that he had a fake identity, or if he was caught by the Black Dawn Society, it didn't seem that the outcome would be good if he got caught by either group. He definitely realized it even more after seeing the blow from the principal a while ago. He must be careful of that person, too. The only benefit I could gain from this mission was the omnipotent stone, and even that stone was fake. No matter how he looked at it, he only suffered a loss. Ludger didn't feel regretful. A trace was left. The omnipotent stone that Demeyers stole was a fake one made by the principal. It wasn't a real relic. However, he could not affirm that the omnipotent stone did not exist just by that. When the principal called him out and told him about it privately, Ludger hadn't found her words strange at all. Demeyers and other members of the Black Dawn Society couldn't have been fooled around like that just from a fake item. There must have been a real item that they were bound to be attracted to. When the principal found out that they had discovered the real item, she had made the fake one and wiped them out. It meant that the real item still remained. Since I have left a trace on the fake item, I'm sure the principal will go to check the real stone. I can just remember the trace that I left on the fake one. That was why, when the principal was on the verge of dropping her attack, Ludger had carved a trace on the fake stone by himself that even the principal wouldn't be able to notice. The fake stone itself emitted such powerful mana that even the principal would not be able to notice that. I moved at the right timing. The moment he was about to exit the silent forest while thinking so, crack. There was the sound of someone stepping on a branch that echoed from behind him. "Professor?" Ludger slowly turned around. There stood Flora Lumos, who was staring at him with trembling eyes. Did she see it? Ludger did not question why Flora was here. Just the fact that she now encountered him in that silent forest was all that mattered. Ludger clenched his fist and released it again so she wouldn't be able to see that. What should I do here now? He thought of destroying the evidence immediately, but Ludger opened his mouth while thinking it was too much. "Flora Lumos, why are you here?" "Pardon. And no, well that's." Flora Lumos could not answer why she had entered the silent forest hastily. That was because, how can I just say that I followed him because I smelled a nice scent for the first time? And if even the someone that she encountered at the end of the scent was Ludger Chelsea, wouldn't she look like a pervert if she said it like that? Aren't you going to answer? That. Why are you here, Professor? In the end, that was all Flora could say. Ludger sighed low at her confused response. Seeing that she didn't quibble over it seriously, she didn't seem to have seen the scene that happened in the darkness. Even so, people were guarding the silent forest outside. Did she accidentally arrive there by using the other path? Flora Lumos. This forest is dangerous for a student like you. Hurry and go back. I'm not that weak. The silent forest was a dangerous place, even more so for students. However, if it was a student like Flora, she could endure the silent forest. Moreover, because she had a unique physical type of magic synesthesia, she was able to avoid it if the mana of the forest was dangerous. Flora wanted to ask since she came all the way there. Was it right that he came all the way here using magic to cover his appearance? And what on earth was that magic? Flora, who was about to ask that, found out that Ludger was holding a medicine bottle in one hand. "Professor, what's that?" "It's nothing." Ludger said so and put the medicine bottle into his pocket. Flora stared suspiciously at Ludger. She had come into the forest after chasing the scent, but there was a big light flashing from a distance. She went all the way here to follow the scent, and there was Ludger. Flora, where the hell are you? Hoo-hoo." At that moment, Cheryl Wagner's weeping voice echoed as she searched for her from afar. Flora and Ludger both shut their mouths at the same time. "Flora, Tilda, I'm scared. Where the hell did you go, Tilda?" "Ha," Ludger sighed and walked. "Follow me. I'll help you get out of this forest safely with your lost friend." Flora also calmly followed Ludger because she had given up on questioning him in a situation where the mood had been broken. Ludger saved Cheryl, who was being bullied like a ring around the rosy by the vengeful spirits, then took both of them out of the forest. Just in time, the guards who were exploring the outside of the forest found the three people and approached them, then asked for the whole story. The students entered the forest and got lost. That's why I took them and led them to the way out. Ludger then replied that it wasn't a big deal to them. The tracking party who had been stationed near the forest were dissolving at the order of the principal. Cheryl repetitively said, "I'm sorry, Tilda," while crying, but Flora wasn't like that. Why was Professor Ludger in that forest? And what on earth was the magic that he used? Flora couldn't erase her suspicious gaze as she was looking at Ludger's back. Chapter 66, A Witch's Trap, 2. When I arrived at the entrance of the forest, most of the people were backing down, and only a few people in charge of the forest remained. Among them, the most prominent human being was, as expected, the principal. Her distinctive two-toned hair stood out, even during the night. "Your Honor." "Ah. Professor Ludger." The president greeted Ludger with a grin. Then she opened her eyes wide when she saw two girl students standing restlessly behind Ludger's back. "Oh, what happened with both of them?" "Because they entered the silent forest recklessly, I took these students who got lost and came here." "The silent forest?" The principal squinted her eyes for a moment. The shivering Cheryl Wagner quivered her body even more as it was hard for her to bear the anxiety, and Flora Lumos shut her lips tightly. To go to a dangerous place called the Silent Forest in the middle of the night, what on earth was the reason for that? WLI. Cheryl was choked up and couldn't speak properly. At that moment, Flora stepped up. It's because of me. Flora. I went into the Silent Forest on my own. Cheryl was just chasing me. Flora Lumos. Flora Lumos, a second-year Surin senior, was also a student whom the principal had been watching with interest. Her family, appearance, and magic talent. Such a lady went into the Silent Forest on her own. Did something happen? No. It just happened because I was walking thoughtlessly to lift my mood. Then Professor Ludger saved Cheryl and me. I see. The principal did not ask Flora why she went into the Silent Forest, because she already knew that Flora Lumos was innocent. It was not nonsense to say that they went in by mistake. Because the Silent Forest was so wide, it was practically impossible to manage all of the forest's areas, even in Surin. Especially on dark nights like that one, students were sometimes attracted to the magic power of the forest without realizing it, so that could have been their reason. She was just possessed by the magic power of the forest. The principal stared at Ludger, who brought the two students. Thank you for taking such a long walk, Professor Ludger. It was a matter of course. But what can I do but apologize? The case is already over. Have you finished everything, Your Honor? Yes, I did it myself due to the urgency. The principal apologized and took a close look at Ludger's expression, but Ludger's expression remained unchanged. He wasn't surprised, relieved, or annoyed that he had walked in vain. He just accepted the situation as it was. Understood. Oh, your feelings weren't hurt. I asked you to do it and ended it on my own. I think the case has been solved well because the principal is more competent than me. That would have been a more efficient and faster way to get things done. The principal nodded with a puzzled look at Ludger's words. That, yes. Well, that's true. I have no complaints about that. I don't feel disappointed or sad about such a trivial thing. The principal was at a loss for words at the response that was so honest and straightforward, as expected from a soldier. Ludger had been very consistent since the first time she had seen him. More than that, the item in your hand, Your Honor. Ludger opened his mouth when he saw the item that was wrapped in a cloth in the principal's hand. Ah, this one. It's nothing. I see. When the principal said that, Ludger's attention was drawn to it. He acted secretly, even though he knew what it was. Ludger nodded and aimed his gaze slightly at the two students he had brought along. So what should I do? Ah, well, students can make mistakes like that, right? So I think you can talk to them properly and send them back to the dormitory. I don't have to give them a penalty point? Oh my, you're saying something so heartless. I'll take care of them, so just send them back. Why, Your Honor? Cheryl looked at the president with a touched look and eyes full of awe. Flora just stood still as if she were not particularly interested in such things. Then I'll take the responsibility to send them back. Yes, Professor Ludger, please do a little more work tonight. Understood. Ludger then left that place after he finished his encounter with the principal. So what happened? After Ludger left with the two students, Wilford, who was watching the situation from afar, approached and asked the principal, with Ludger jealousy. This incident has completely wiped out my suspicions toward him. Is that so? Yes, he didn't react much even when he saw me. If he had anything to do with them, he should have shown at least a slight bit of agitation, but it didn't happen. In addition, Ludger had even taken two lost students out of the woods. Maybe because she had asked for help, he had rushed over there and found the students in the woods. He's quick in managing his work, and I like his attitude as well. Most of all, he has a strong mentality that doesn't fall to my captivation. You must like him. Well, I think so. I think the same goes for Mr. Wilford, though. Ho ho. Well, I won't deny it either. Wilford was a former knight, so he especially liked Ludger. He had a restrained and sharp devotion that was unmatched by the other weak wizards. His remarkably trained body in particular, which stood out subtly under his attire, showed that he was different from common wizards. His physical training couldn't have been sloppy. That part made a pretty good impression on Wilford. Anyway, I think this case brought an alert to them. I'm not sure. I hope so. Or should I have captured them alive and questioned them? The principal shook her head violently at Wilford's words. You know about it very well, too, Mr. Wilford, that it's not going to work on them. That's true. They were the members of a secret society that hid in Surin. No matter how many of those guys she caught and interrogated, it would be impossible for them to tell her the information about their organization. If they were that meek in the first place, the organization wouldn't have recruited them. Furthermore, some measures might have been taken by them to prevent another possible leak of information. It was much better to get rid of the visible ones. Come and read on our website, Wuxia World site. Thanks, I hope this will calm them down for a while. Now go back. Ludger, who escorted Flora to the dormitory, turned his back without hesitation as he had finished his work. What's the matter? Flora called Ludger and was about to say something. However, no matter how many times Flora mumbled with her lips, her voice didn't come out properly. It's late at night. If you have nothing to say, I'll go. Ludger had no consideration or concern, even when the other person was Flora. He disappeared like the wind as he was seemingly busy. Cheryl, who was next to her, even got astonished. Whoa. As expected from Professor Ludger, he's so ruthless. Flora, are you okay? Yeah, I'm all right. I was worried. Why the hell did you go into that forest all of a sudden? Just because. There were times when I just wanted to go around without realizing it, and then out of all places I went into that forest. Phew, I got it. But you need to be careful next time. I was also very scared. Yeah, thanks a lot for your concern, Cheryl. Flora went back to the dormitory with a weak smile. After washing up and changing into her pajamas, she flopped down on the bed. She kept remembering Ludger's appearance, whom she had seen in the silent forest a while ago. Professor. What you held in your hand was obviously some kind of medicine bottle. Ludger was slightly startled when she had asked about it. Even when she first discovered Ludger from a distance, she could only see his back, but he had definitely been shaking. Why was he being like that in a place where there were no people? Did he get hurt anywhere? A hypothesis suddenly came to her mind. Flora unconsciously propped up her upper body. No way is it the truth. Once she was immersed in her thoughts, the other thoughts came consecutively, and she couldn't let them go. It had certainly looked like that. His body shivered because he was in pain. Even his behavior of hiding in a remote place where people couldn't see and taking medicine secretly. There's no way that Professor Ludger is taking bad medicine. He's been pretending to be strong, but it doesn't mean that he's not feeling well, right? Flora shook her head, realizing that she was thinking too much. No, I can't be sure yet, so let's not think of it too much. However, no matter how much she inwardly denied it, she couldn't help but keep thinking similar thoughts. Next time, if she had the chance, she could check it then. Flora closed her eyes while thinking so. She didn't think she would have a nightmare unlike the usual that night. A night when everyone fell into a deep sleep beyond midnight, the principal finally checked with her own eyes where the real omnipotent stone was. It's working, huh? She turned her eyes to the fake stone and moved the real stone safely and stored it. For that simple distraction, she had taken measures to get rid of the roaches that hid in Surin herself. She had even gone as far as keeping secrets from others. It was inevitable if she wanted to get things done properly, but it was a relief. Thanks to the bait, she was able to wipe out some of the enemies, and the real stone was kept safe. It was a storage facility similar to an altar. The principal breathed a sigh of relief as she looked at the omnipotent stone at the center of the altar. It looked exactly the same as the replica made to deceive others, but the real relic was so dangerous that one shouldn't approach it recklessly. Just like a stone that made one's wishes come true, it responded to its owner's desire and made their wish come true. The problem is, there's no limit to its ability. That was the scary point of its omnipotence. That stone responded to the darkest and most powerful desire that was hidden deep inside the user. Even when someone begged on the stone to make a lot of money, it wouldn't come true unless it was their real desire. Rather, the stone often forcefully granted what the user did not want to happen. Most human desires were based on darker evils. Rather than making money and being happy, human beings secretly wanted the person they hated and despised to be ruined or suffer. The stone granted that very wish. But if it doesn't have an owner, the relic scatters the wavelength of its own magic power and lures in the person who is sensitive to it. Therefore, the omnipotent stone had to be stored in an enclosed space covered with countless partition walls, so that its magic power wouldn't leak out. And those who guarded the surroundings of the stone had to be people who would not be easily seduced by its magic. That's how much I have to be careful with it. In the pieces of literature of which only a few remained, there was a record that a kingdom disappeared in the past because of that stone. One might wonder why such a dangerous thing should be stored in Surin. But in other words, because it was located in Surin, the item could be stored safely. If it had fallen to the hands of the Magic Tower or any other kingdom, a war would have been raging already. It's a relief that everything went well. The principal closed the entrance to the partition walls completely after checking the omnipotent stone for the last time. The metal outer wall that had a thickness of 3 m, which blocked the wavelength of the stone's magic power, closed with a thud, and darkness emerged within the storage. Only the green light emanating from the omnipotent stone dimly lit up the surroundings. That was how the omnipotent stone would have been placed there for a long time, once again out of anyone's sight. If only a shadow did not wriggle in the dark. SS shadow. A man rose from within the shadow. Fee. The man, who shook off his dizzy head once and sighed, looked up and stared at the omnipotent stone that was located in the center of the enclosed space. That's real, huh? It looked similar to the fake one, but the quality of its atmosphere was different. Ludger's excellent sight immediately distinguished the original from the fake one. The omnipotent stone also scattered a stronger wavelength around it, perhaps realizing that humans existed around it. Ludger frowned as he felt its wavelength with his skin. Is it seducing me? A stone that made wishes come true. If there was a mentally sensitive person within a certain range, it emitted the wavelength of magic power to make a wish toward the stone. It didn't just have an impact on his body. It dug deep into a person's mind and touched the desire hidden deep inside them. It's doing an interesting thing, but it only worked for weak people. Ludger approached the omnipotent stone instead, then he reached out and grabbed the stone. I'm sorry, but I don't intend to make you realize my desires on your own. Woo-woong. The omnipotent stone vibrated as if it was disobeying Ludger. If someone was seeing it for the first time, they would have gotten confused and gasped. How many relics do you think I've seen so far? He was an expert in that area. Chapter 67, Relic. Ludger had traveled around the continent to look for relics, the original fragments that he was gathering, to be exact. It was to make a relic. He had visited many cities, many countries, and many ethnic groups. As a result, there were times when he had unintentionally encountered relics that were not related to the fragments. Even common wizards had never encountered any relics in their lifetime. Ludger, on the other hand, had seen several relics so far. In terms of relics, Ludger could be seen as more experienced than anyone else. Stay still. He recited those words as if commanding the stone and invoked his mana. The omnipotent stone emitted a violent magic power as if to resist Ludger, but Ludger was not surprised. Sometimes that kind of volition existed for a unique relic. It was a small mystery created by the peculiar, powerful force of the relic. The omnipotent stone existed to satisfy the desires of others. Its reckless purpose of listening to one's desire was sublimated to the will and influenced the surroundings of the relic by spreading the wavelength of desire to its surroundings. In some ways, relics were also cursed items, so it resisted Ludger, but Ludger sneered at the relic's volition. You can't make my real wish come true anyway, no matter what kinds of methods you use. Even in front of the omnipotent stone, Ludger did not believe in the omnipotent stone itself. Was it going to grant his wish? He was sure that the stone would listen to it, but it would only be within the limits of the stone's power. He couldn't say that the stone would grant his wish. A wish with limitations was not a wish, after all. It was nothing more than a mere fake wish fulfillment. If you're a fake wish fulfiller, then just do as I say. The omnipotent stone didn't give up. Instead of scattering the wavelength of its powerful magic power to its surroundings, it focused more on Ludger. Green magic power coiled around Ludger's body. Ludger frowned at the magic power that permeated his mind. A useless struggle. However, he did not push away or block the stone's magic power. Instead, he committed a bold act by increasing the mana in his hand that was holding the stone. Woo-wong. Then, it was the omnipotent stone that was flustered. What on earth did this human do? Instead of raising his defense, I received more magic power. The omnipotent stone didn't stop invading Ludger's mind while questioning his actions. The moment it went into Ludger's inner mind while thinking that it was a good occurrence, instead, bump! The magic power that the omnipotent stone flowed into his mind was blocked at some point as if it was hitting a barrier. What the hell blocked its magic power? The omnipotent stone, which aimed to respond to a human's innermost desires, questioned the situation in which it could no longer enter Ludger's inner mind. Did Ludger pretend like he let the magic power into his inner mind but actually block it off? Why? It found out right away that it wasn't the case. It wasn't Ludger's mana that had blocked the omnipotent stone. It was a disparate force that was completely different from Ludger's mana. It was a strange force that could not even be classified that blocked the omnipotent stone. It was a force that was impossible to understand. The stone could not even analyze the force. Mana? No, that kind of disparate energy was different from that. It was higher than mana. It was as if something else was watching and protecting his mind. You'd better stop there. Ludger warned against the volition of the omnipotent stone. If you go beyond that, it won't be good for either you or me. Ludger's warning was not a mere bluff. It was sincere advice. The stone was sure that something worse would happen if it attempted to go beyond that. If the omnipotent stone had feelings, the stone would have been deeply moved by Ludger's warning. However, the volition that the omnipotent stone possessed only commanded the stone to do its role as best as it could. There was no emotional factor within the stone. The omnipotent stone accepted Ludger's advice. If it attempted to go further, it would be destroyed and never see the light again. If that happened, it would not be able to perform its role in the future. SSS. Good job. The omnipotent stone gave up on its will. It was similar to stopping after hitting a barrier, but it was the volition of the stone that made the choice. Ludger put his strength on the omnipotent stone as it was, forcing his own wish into it. The fragment of the relic that I currently have. With one of his hands that wasn't holding the stone, he took a fragment out of his inside pocket. Tell me where the other 4 fragments are. At that moment, a brilliant green light burst out of the omnipotent stone. The light was clear and would have been strong enough to be seen from quite a distance if emitted in an open area. However, in an enclosed space that blocked the wavelength of the stone's magic power, the light only shone inside. When the light of the stone was completely gone, Ludger removed his hand from the omnipotent stone. 2, huh? 2. That was the number of fragments that the omnipotent stone had shown in response to Ludger's wish. What Ludger wanted was the location of the other 4 fragments, but the limit that the stone could show was only 2 fragments, and one of the 2 was the fragment whose location had been roughly discovered by him already. The only benefit I gained from the stone was, in the end, the location of the other 1 fragment. It was a very ungraceful effect for a stone who granted people's wishes, but Ludger decided to think positively. Just by finding another fragment of the elusive relic, he had saved many years that could have been wasted. Even so, I didn't think that the fragment would be so near. The whereabouts of the fragment that he had unintentionally discovered, it existed in the big city of Leathervelk. It's a relief to discover that 1 fragment. Woo-wong. The omnipotent stone vibrated finely as if protesting against Ludger. If the stone had helped him, he should take the stone outside. But Ludger lightly dismissed its volition. You are a dangerous item. You will continue to destroy the people who are influenced by you. You should stay here forever. Woo-wong. The omnipotent stone tried to protest violently, but Ludger had already covered his body with shadow and whisked himself away into the darkness. The omnipotent stone that was left alone blinked green lights as it was seemingly protesting, but the stone soon calmed down. Because there was no one who could listen to it as I came back to my room, I sat on the sofa for a while to rest, because of the extreme amount mana I had consumed. As expected, teleporting between spaces wasn't supposed to be done several times. I felt dizzy and nauseated, and most of all, I had consumed a lot of mana. In addition to that, I had even used my strength to utilize the omnipotent stone. I was lucky that I didn't collapse from exhaustion. Come and read on our website, Wuxia World site. Thanks, there were noises flowing from my brain. I frowned at the noises and roughly emptied the pills into my mouth. The mana from the pills that permeated my body filled the mana I had consumed, but it was insufficient. That time, the recovery needed more time, especially because of how much mana I had consumed. I'm going crazy. To avoid those noises, I was always going around while chewing pills in my mouth. Of course, I benefited from these annoying noises that time. The omnipotent stone penetrated my mind, but thanks to it, I was able to get over it without being seriously damaged. Still, I couldn't help but be annoyed. It was fortunate that it was the first stage. The recovery would be hard if it became worse than that. I pressed my finger against my throbbing forehead slightly as if I was doing acupressure therapy. Perhaps because I had stayed still for about 30 minutes, the noises from my head disappeared at some point. Was it over? I stood up with a sigh of relief. Now that I knew the whereabouts of the fragment, I was going to inquire about it. When I grabbed the communication crystal ball and sent my mana into the ball, the reaction immediately came. "Did you call me?" "Yeah." Ainz responded immediately, as if he had been waiting. It was already late and past midnight, but he responded to the call sharply like that. He must have been waiting for me to contact him. "Are you done with everything you were attempting to solve?" It ended faster than I thought. Thanks to that, I'm able to have some leisure time. That's a relief. "You can push forward the appointment time. A weekend would be better if we could do that." I was just thinking that it was the right time. "I don't think that's all you wanted to say to me. Is there anything else, as expected from Ainz?" Maybe it was because he had been working with me for quite a long time, but he was quick to notice that kind of thing. "I found the location of another fragment piece." "Where?" "It's in Leathervelk. You should search for it mainly at the auction house." "Auction house, huh?" "There's only one auction house in Leathervelk." "Yeah, there was only one auction house in Leathervelk. Kunst, the one and only Leathervelk's auction house. It was one of the auction houses operated by Luke Co., the largest auction company in the Exilian Empire, and among them, the branch in Leathervelk was one of the largest in the continent. The influence of the Kunst auction house was not limited only to Leathervelk or the Exilian Empire. The Kunst auction house showed a very high participation rate because rich people from all continents could gather and purchase items there. Money was bound to attract money. High-quality antiques, historical objects, and even outstanding artifacts. Good items attracted rich people. And those people invested huge amounts of money to show off their wealth. The auction house was the place where big bucks circulated that even I, who received a huge salary from Surin, couldn't help but be astonished by. When such an overwhelming winning bid came out, rumors spread again and attracted the attention of people from other countries. It was a repetitive, vicious cycle of money. Such a vicious cycle created what was the Kunst auction house. And if my prediction was correct, the fragment I was looking for would exist at the Kunst auction house. It's not bad timing since a big event will be held in the Kunst auction house soon. Ainz would be able to easily check the list of the soon-to-be-appearing items at the Kunst auction house. Check the list and find out when they're up for auction. I got it without you having to tell me about that, but isn't the Kunst auction house a big place? So what? Then I think the usual method will be a bit hard to implement. I realized what Ainz was concerned about as I heard his anxious voice. I know it as well. For now, I'm going to make a move as a proper guest. The Kunst auction house maintained a terrifying security system, as it was a place where all kinds of wealthy people gathered. When the auction was held, they could even hire a number of people who were as skilled as knights and place them as the guards. It meant that the scale of the auction was that huge, and Luke Co.'s reputation for conducting such an auction house was also great. They weren't just mere knights. Even wizards participated in it, and all the valuable items were even under security magic. It was too much to stick to the old methods in such a place. Don't worry too much. There's a lot of time left anyway. Well, I get it. Let's check the list of items first. Arg. Why are you like that? Suddenly, Hans screamed, and I wondered if something had happened. No, it's nothing big. It's just because a bothersome good-for-nothing is throwing a tantrum. A bothersome good-for-nothing, you called them, didn't you? One of them has come already. Ah, I see. They arrived faster than I had expected. At that moment, a shout of something was heard from beyond the crystal ball. Arg, wait, I'm coming. Seeing Hans shouting fiercely like that, I wondered if a certain person had arrived first. Anyway, I'll see you around the neighborhood soon. Yes. Work hard. I ended my call with Hans. I had gained everything I could gain from utilizing the omnipotent stone, and I had killed the guys who had attempted to steal it. That ended the case related to the stone that granted wishes. I have cleared almost all suspicions of the principal toward me with this case, so that alone is enough. It was time for me to go back to my daily life as Professor Ludger Chelsea again. What bothered me for the moment was Flora Lumos, that girl. I don't think I encountered her in the forest by accident. She had dropped by exactly where I was. Or did she run into the place where I was during the night by accident? And in silent forest on top of that. But if it wasn't just a mere coincidence, if she was actually coming for me, that was all the more ridiculous. The Aeter Nocturnus that I used erased my own presence, so a mere student shouldn't have been able to sense me. Even the principal hadn't sensed me. Flora Lumos. Or was there something else that was peculiar about her? But the good thing is that, judging from her reaction, she didn't see me using magic. Perhaps it was thanks to the high-tiered destruction spell that was used by the principal that attracted attention instead. But it didn't change the fact that she couldn't erase her suspicions of why I was there. Although I had been silent all the way through, I should be careful. Flora Lumos' behavior also needed to be watched closely, but I had criticized her severely, so she would be quiet for a while, right? I fell asleep late at night while thinking about it, because I had to wake up early again the next day in the early morning in front of the professor's office. I saw a girl pacing around in front of the professor's office door and had no choice but to stop my footsteps. Flora Lumos. Oh, PR Professor Ludger? The girl whom I was concerned about because of the encounter the previous day was waiting for me in front of the professor's office. Chapter 68. Flora Lumos, what the hell is going on here? Flora hesitated to answer Rudger's question. Actually, she wanted to ask Rudger if he used unusual magic without anyone else's knowledge. But, how do you say that? Smell was the only proof that he had used magic, and only someone with a special constitution like Flora could sense that unique fragrance. Ah, that's so. Why was Rudger there that night in the first place? And what was the medicine box he was carrying? She had several questions she wanted to ask, but at the same time she couldn't. Come to think of it, she wasn't particularly good with Rudger. Although Rudger himself says he does not understand at all, Flora still has not forgotten the humiliation she suffered on the first day of class. All of them were defeats caused by her shortcomings, and even the battle of insults that followed did not end nicely. To her, Rudger Chelsea was nothing more than a man worthy of her challenge. Flora was fiddling with the hem of her own uniform skirt. Yeah, that's right. Calm down, Flora Lumos. Even Mr. Rudger is sick, that's not my business. Until Flora had put her thoughts together, Rudger just stood still and stared at her. Flora coughed a little and she looked at Rudger. And she unwittingly turned her eyes to the side. She felt ashamed when she finally made up her mind and met Rudger's eyes. What? Those eyes. Rudger was just staring normally, but not at all in his predicament. Rudger is a man who turns into a picture just by keeping his mouth shut. His impression is sharp, and charisma is felt just by looking at him. Those who receive such a gaze from him will automatically feel embarrassed. That intense, unshakable gaze had something that was difficult to face for more than 3 seconds. It was as if she was dealing with beings higher than the nobility. Is there nothing to say? Rudger was not at all embarrassed as he was going to work early in the morning and a student was standing in front of the door, especially a student who may have witnessed his secret. Have you seen it? So you want to threaten me with it? Flora, unaware of his thoughts, panicked at Roger's gaze. In the end, Flora had no choice but to bring out her purpose after hesitating. I heard that you are hiring assistants. Actually, she didn't come here for anything related to teaching. She tried to ask what she had seen in the forest, but she dared not speak, so she switched the topic. In fact, when Roger hired an assistant, she was intrigued. Obviously. Roger nodded her head and agreed with her. Flora clenched her tiny fist tightly and spoke with courage. Can I help you with your work? Raise one of his hands and put it on his chest. For a moment, Roger wondered if he had heard something wrong. What did you just say? I said that I could help you with your assistance. So did you say that you want to be my assistant now? No, not that, Flora pursed her lips. Still, she said that he would come and help with the work, as she is a senior in the 2nd year. If it were another teacher, they would thank her immediately and hold her hand, but Roger's reaction was blunt. Hey, even though I look like this, I'm very talented at magic. I know. If you know, why are you reacting like that? Because I no longer need an assistant right now. Yeah, Flora's eyes widened as if she had heard something wrong. Her long, dark blue hair shook due to her emotions. That what now? It's as you say. I've already hired one assistant, and I don't need another assistant right now. Above all else, I look at things other than magical skills when I hire an assistant. I've already explained this in class. Yes. Roger does not hire assistants simply because of their magical abilities or their background, but because of how diligent and faithful they are to their role. That was the condition Roger put forward. Flora was a little shocked because what she said with courage was so harshly rejected. She slightly bit her lip and lowered her head. At that moment, Roger's voice rang in her ear. But I appreciate your kindness. Yeah, Flora shook her head. That, weren't you just here to help? Oh, wasn't I? That, didn't you misunderstand me? Roger couldn't understand her and decided to act like an adult. Then do that. Well, it's not like that. If there is nothing else to do, I will go in first. No, I have one more question. One more. Roger hoped that the last question would not waste his time or he would be really bitter. As he stared at Flora, she roused her magical powers even though she was pouting. Isn't that what Mr. Roger said back then? If there is anyone who understands my magic, please come and find me. In the last class, Roger showed his students the coordinate designation magic and said that if there is a student who can imitate it, he will give them extra points accordingly. Look at this. Flora said and created a tiny drop of water in the empty space between her and Roger. She didn't stop there, as small pieces of ice formed on the ceiling and the wind blew from the other side of the hallway. Roger's eyes widened as he watched the scene. That was obviously the coordinate designation method he showed in class the other day. It wasn't as sophisticated and neat as he showed, and even the effect is only at a weak level, but the basis is definitely the same as what he showed. You were successful. Because I am a genius. As Roger graciously admitted, Flora naturally raised her nose. What do you want? Do you want to get the extra points as I said then? At first, I thought I would just get the points. Flora didn't think it would be fun then, and halfway through, she changed her mind. I want another reward that is equal to the points. Another reward? Yeah. Flora's request was bold, but she deserved it. Roger pondered for a moment and then nodded his head. Good. Really? She didn't expect that Roger would agree to her request. Of course, she also had her own inner intentions. She can't openly ask him to show her another magic, and can't ask him to tell her a secret either. But what if she left that judgment to Roger? She was sure that he would give her a suitable reward, because Mr. Roger is surprisingly knowledgeable. Roger Chelisai is blunt, hard-headed, and sometimes rude, but he is confident in his words. Come in, Roger said and opened the door to the office. Yes, I told you to come in. Flora swallowed her saliva. Is he saying that the two of them are going into the office alone now? Flora had a strange thought without her knowing, but then she shook her head. Yes, he just told me to come in. Let's not think strange things. She said yes and followed Roger into the office. The office was just like Roger, neat and tidy. It was well organized, and there was a strange sense of stability thanks to the pleasant smell of wood and the scent of ink and paper, and even the light that softly illuminates the interior space. This is it. Roger guided Flora through a door on one wall of the office. It was a private laboratory dedicated to teachers, where the assistants stayed and Roger himself used to do magic experiments and research. Roger opened the door and went in first, and Flora followed. Wide. Flora had such a sentiment as she looked at Roger's laboratory. Usually teachers are all supported with similarly sized labs, but Roger felt particularly large compared to other teachers because there was hardly any clutter that took up space. Is he really from the military? He didn't put anything aside, except for the bare minimum of books, documents, and materials he needed. On a long blackboard on one wall, dense magic circles and theories drawn with magic chalk were visible. What the hell did you study? Most of the writings were merely copying passages from papers or books, which Flora also knew. However, seeing a pattern drawn on one end of the magic board, Flora had no choice but to stop without her knowing. This is. Roger researched the starting point for various magics. She didn't feel much inspiration there, but the pattern she's seeing now is different. Pattern? No. Is that alcohol, but for a drink, the shape is a bit strange. Basically, the magic technique takes on a three-dimensional form as if drawing a picture through lines and planes with magic in the air. Its appearance varies greatly depending on the magic, but there are many things that are basically splendid or create elegant beauty. However, that one painted by Roger was strange. It looked like an ordinary cube. When asked to draw, she could draw even with her eyes closed. However, if there is another small cube inside the cube and each edge is connected by a line, the story is different. Did he just draw it? No, it's not just a drawing. As she approached and tried to study it, Roger opened his mouth. I was thinking about what to give you. Flora turned to Roger, who looked like he had already decided. The coordinate designation formula I showed. As you feel and use it, it is to set mathematical formulas and coordinates centered on the user, and to manifest magic from distance, controlling the mana used as much as possible, fixing it in the air, and manifesting another technique at the coordinates. Of course, students who can't understand even if I say this won't be able to do it. In fact, Flora Lumos was the same. She could only imitate Roger thanks to her talent. If it's you, it's okay if I show you this. Roger said and began to draw a magic circle in front of him. However, it was very different from the usual magic circle. What is that? Flora unknowingly shook her shoulder. The basic technique is to draw a line of magic in the air to create a three-dimensional picture, but what Roger showed her now was entirely different. It was a technique and magic that showed the possibility of another dimension beyond 3 dimensions. At the same time, Flora's synesthesia was activated, a transcendent sense that it's beyond the limits of the human senses. The moment she felt it with her senses of sight and smell, Flora could not stand the shock and passed out. Chapter 69. Flora rubbed her forehead and slowly opened her eyes. What? She fainted when she saw Roger's magic and had a dream that made her feel nostalgic and sympathetic. Her body felt warm as if she was in the arms of her mother, who is now dead. Belatedly, Flora realized she was lying on the sofa. Ah! Flora slowly raised her torso and discovered that the coat covering her body was running down. She recognized the familiar black frock coat with golden thread. This? Are you awake? Unknowingly, she turned her head toward the place where the voice came from and saw Roger Chelisai sitting at his work desk, reading. Instead of the coat he usually wears, he wore a pure white shirt and a black vest. His long bangs were slightly pushed back, revealing his forehead, and his usual sharp gaze was diluted thanks to the rimless glasses he wore on his face, further accentuating his intellectual feeling. You don't remember? Yeah, I showed you one magic. It was only then that Flora could remember what Roger was talking about. He showed her a magic, and stunned by the intense sensation, Flora fainted. No, that's... Sir, that's... Flora got up from the sofa, but perhaps because of the shock, her legs lost strength and she fell back on the sofa. Keep sitting. It seems that you have not yet recovered from the shock of fainting. How long has it been? About 30 minutes. About 30 minutes. Flora shook her head and stared at Roger almost as if she was about to eat him. What the hell was that magic? What do you mean? What you showed me right before I passed out. Ah, that. Roger replied in a muffled voice as if it was nothing. It was just something I just came up with. It's called Klein disease. Klein disease? Did such magic exist? It is not practical magic in the first place. It's more of an experiment. Is it an experiment? Flora wiggled her lips in disbelief. Others would have thought that it was an unusual type of magic, but Flora knew that Klein's disease was different. It was an innovation. The level of magic that's limited to 3 dimensions was raised. Even after seeing it, Flora could hardly believe that such a magic existed, but she accepted it. Yes, but to Roger it seemed as if it wasn't a big deal. This is an experiment to see the extent to which the magic created through mana can reach. Is that great thing just an experiment? Teacher is... What the hell are you trying to do? Flora couldn't bear to ask about it because she couldn't possibly fathom the magic Roger was trying to create. The reason he created the Klein disease was because his curiosity for mana was not satiated. Does mana exist purely materially? If so, does mana receive full physical effects? Mana manifested in the form of magic. Mana was already something beyond the laws of physics. Magic is the embodiment of mystery, and mana it's the base, the unknown that has not yet been revealed. With mana, one can jump through space, and Klein's disease was created to prove that, as it was a magic that can be manifested in 4 dimensions. Mana goes beyond mere space, and can interfere with dimensions beyond that. However, Klein's disease only serves to prove the hypothesis because there was still not enough research to apply it to other magic. Anyway, I'm glad you woke up. Yes, come to think of it, Flora fainted in the lab, but when she woke up, she was in Roger's office. Did teacher bring me here? I can't leave a fainted student in the lab. Flora recalled the figure of Roger who caught her when she fainted, and her face turned red in an instant. That? Flora Lumos, are your eyes and nose okay? Yeah, why all of a sudden? Before Flora could question it, Roger spoke first. Hey, don't you feel magic in a different way? Flora was astonished because Roger discovered the secret of her peculiar constitution that no one had noticed until now. Damn, how are you? Because I saw it. Did you see it? Every time you look at my magic, your pupils dilate greatly. I found out that you were not looking at the magic spell itself, but the secondary phenomena that resulted from the spell. Flora could not believe that Roger had noticed such a reaction that she was not aware of. And every time you saw a new magic, your fingertips trembled. It's a reflex behavior that occurs when you feel momentary pleasure. In particular, it is good to change the habit of twitching the bridge of the nose. From the looks of it, it seems that you can accept magic with your sense of smell, but it wouldn't be good if you open your nostrils like that. Ah, Flora couldn't stand it and screamed. Why are you screaming? What disrespectful words are you talking about a lady knows? I was talking about your habit. Be careful not to get caught by others. Flora muttered as if fed up with Roger. Roger sighed, stood up from his seat, and walked slowly towards Flora. Don't come near me. I don't know what the misunderstanding was. Roger took his coat from Flora, and after waving it in the air a few times, Roger hung it neatly on the hanger. Seeing you screaming so loudly, it seems that your body has recovered properly. You should leave. Yeah, can't you hear me telling you to leave? Flora asked Roger, still having not cleared her suspicions. Are you not curious? What do you mean? About my unique body? You mean the fact you feel magic in a different way? Right. Flora nodded her head frankly. Her magical synesthesia body had 2 of the 5 senses. If he had been any other wizard, he would not have been able to turn his eyes away from this unbelievable constitution. That's why Flora asked in a worried voice. Not at all. But Roger was different and answered in a firm voice. Yeah, I am not interested in what you are like. That what? However, it would be better not to tell other people about that constitution. Magicians are very dangerous when they discover something they don't know. Flora read something in Roger's attitude, because he seemed to be aware of the magical synesthesia she possessed. In extreme cases, someone might abduct you and use you as a test subject. Gulp. Flora swallowed at Roger's heartfelt warning. At the same time, she couldn't help but think, why are you so calm? Have you ever met someone with a similar constitution besides me? Teacher, Do you know anyone other than me with a constitution similar to mine? Roger didn't answer. Instead, he raised his hand and pointed to the door of the office. Flora wiggled her eyebrows at the action, but did not follow it. It was a moment, but Roger's face had a somewhat sad look on his face, so she did not dare to ask and had no choice but to leave the office. Teacher knew. He must have met someone else besides me. No, rather than that, how did he know that it would be dangerous if her constitution was discovered? And the subtle expression he showed at the end, did we know each other? Then Roger's behavior was understandable. He said that he had an acquaintance with a constitution similar to her, and that acquaintance suffered harm. If so, who was that person? Man? Woman? If it was a woman, what kind of relationship did the two have? No, Flora shook her head and stopped thinking about it. Yes. Let's just move on today. Just as she was thinking about it, Flora suddenly had such a thought. By the way, I haven't received another award instead of the extra points. Roger showed her Klein's disease and did nothing else because she fainted. Flora looked back at the office door. If I go back in now and ask for the prize, that'd be a bit. I'm stupid too. Why did I forget the most important thing because O was so caught up in something else? Flora wanted to rip her hair out, but time that has already passed cannot be turned back. She left her regret behind and had no choice but to back down this time. At that moment, someone from afar approached her with staggering footsteps. No, to be exact, she was approaching Roger's office. You. Huh? Holding an old book in her arms and walking with careful steps. It was a girl with a rare gray hair color, I remember. Flora is not very interested in other people, but she remembers a few unusual children in her class, and Renee was one of them. At the beginning of the semester, she had a quarrel with an aristocratic student, but the fact that she, a commoner, gets along with the third princess overshadowed that. She is also strikingly beautiful in appearance, so even if people don't want to know her, they can't help but remember her. You? Renee also recognized her Flora and stopped her steps. If she were to name the most famous person in Theon's sophomore year, it's her. She is the daughter of the Duke Lumos and has a natural talent for magic in addition to her beautiful appearance. She has no attributes like herself, but unlike her non-attribute magic, which is difficult to understand the source of, her senior has her own firm path. But why is that person in front of Roger's office? The two looked at each other without a word. They take Roger's class together, but other than that, there's almost no contact. However, Flora could not help but doubt why Renee had come to Roger's office, especially when she was holding a book. Renee was also wondering why a senior like Flora was standing in front of Roger's office. It was Flora who moved first in that subtle and uncomfortable silence. Huh, she passed Renee as if she wasn't interested. Renee stared at Flora's back and remembered why she came to Roger's office. Oh right, book. After reading the book on non-attribute magic, she came to return it to the owner, Roger. With that thought in mind, Renee gulped her saliva in front of the door to his office. It was the moment she was about to take a deep breath and then knock. Come in. The door is open. Roger's voice sounded from inside. Chapter 70. After Flora left, Roger recalled the conversation he had just had with her. I asked how she found me, but it was because of the smell. Flora Lumos was born with her constitution to feel magic in a different way. When she sees the same magic, she sees different colors and feels different smells. I was skeptical about her at first, but her reaction to Klein's disease convinced me. There was a loophole in my Aether Nocturnus. It was not possible to avoid everyone's gaze by simply erasing my existence. Flora felt the very subtle magical reverberation that flowed in the magic water and found him. She perceives magic through her senses of smell and sight. Indeed, there must have been a reason for being number one in the second year. It's understandable that she made fun of several teachers so far. If so, what to do next? From Flora's reaction, it was as if she had not seen what Roger had done in the silent forest that day. She had a slightly suspicious gaze, but there was no solid evidence. The opponent is a daughter of the Duke family that the Empire is proud of. If I touch her, it will be troublesome. Still, the Academy is buzzing thanks to the recent events, and I can't do anything over the top. However, it seemed necessary to keep an eye on Flora more closely than usual. I'll let Ainz do the background check. Even so, I'm sure I'll find someone with that kind of constitution in Theon. After all, this is the best academy that teaches magic. Both teachers and students are extraordinary people. Even those whom I have seen so far were only a small fraction of this academy. Do I have to live in a place like this for 2 years? It's been a while since I've worked here, and 2 big incidents have already occurred. How many more will it happen? It was then that I felt a presence in front of the door. Come in. The door is open. As Roger said that, he felt a shudder through the door, and then the door opened cautiously. A girl with dense facial features, clear blue eyes, and gray hair that is hard to find in Theon poked her face through the half-open door. Is it Renee? Yes. What did you come here for? The book. I finished it. Book. Roger recalled that he had handed Renee a book about non-attribute magic. With only her face sticking out, Renee entered the office with her careful steps. She looked as if she couldn't make the slightest mistake. I thought I should give it back to teacher. You mean that? Yes, Mr. Roger. Roger shook his head and said, The book is not mine. I, too, am only giving further what I have received. Then this book. Keep that book with you? Yes. You may have read it many times, but you will always need it. Sometimes you won't remember parts of it, so it's better to have it just in case. Still, some things show their value only when they have a suitable user. The book about non-attribute magic will shine more when you have it than if it is in my hands. Roger took a moment to catch his breath and took off the rimless glasses he wore on his face. I believe that you will take good care of it. Renee couldn't say anything because Roger's words cluttered her head. Do you believe in me? Renee was dizzy as Roger's words kept echoing in her head. Why do you believe? Do you have a good reason for that? Or is it simply because I am the owner of non-attribute magic? She suddenly had a thought. Roger knew the previous owner of this book. If so, did he hear something from him? What? That's so? Renee couldn't help but ask. Even when she opened her mouth, only unlisted languages come out. It was because of Roger's outspoken words that her head was not spinning properly. If you have nothing to say, just leave. Classes are starting soon. Yes. In the end, Renee gave up and was forced to leave the office. She walked down the hallway with staggering footsteps as her head was still a mess. Oh, right. It was only after she wandered aimlessly and reached her sparse garden that Renee finally regained her sanity. I was going to ask about the assistant position as well. She was so embarrassed and out of context that she didn't even think of asking. By the way, it seems that Senior Flora also came to see Mr. Roger. Did she come here for Mr. Roger's assistant position too? As a senior in the 2nd year who holds the title of genius, which is rare in Theon, Flora Lumos was pretty popular even among the freshmen. Although she comes from a great family, she does not belong to a faction unlike other nobles and stays with her childhood friend. No. Let's stop paying attention for now. I have to start preparing for the next class at the library during the rest of the time. Just as I was thinking about it, I heard a conversation coming from over the trees in the garden. Renee had no choice but to stop her steps when she saw the students who had finally appeared. They were students from aristocratic families that stood out even from afar. Also, she doesn't get along well with them as usual. Among them, there was a man who left a great impression on Renee when he approached her and wanted to date her as if he was doing her a favor. In the end, Renee relentlessly pushed him away, and naturally he began to harbor a grudge against Renee. I really hate it. In addition to that, a group of people who were jealous and secretly quarreled after seeing Renee getting along with the 3rd princess recently joined the situation. I didn't know she was going to meet them here. There was no way they would leave her alone. It was better to avoid any clashes, and Renee has realized through her past experiences. She immediately turned her gaze away. Let's go inside. Renee headed deeper into the garden. Since the site of Theon is so wide, even the size of the garden was different. There were marble fountains, colorful flower fields, and a long avenue of trees. Even some artificial forests or small open spaces have been created, and sometimes the students used them to socialize outdoors. Some say that there is a secret place in this large garden that other people don't see, but she didn't know that. Let's hide for now. Renee moved immediately and went inside the garden. vines and beautiful pink flowers grow to block the sunlight, creating a long tunnel of arched pergola. As she walked through it, it was as if she were passing through a door to another world. As she exited the pergola, she saw the lush greenery. There was a place like this. She had just entered this place and was still not familiar with the geography or structure, so whenever she encountered a new place, she was simply amazed. Renée pricked her ears and listened to the situation outside. Did they go? She could still hear the soft chatter between them. Are they thinking of staying here? I don't think they'll come this far. Killing time in this area in moderation, avoiding the noble students, and going back through a detour were Renée's thoughts when she leaned her back against a suitable tree and suddenly turned her head in one direction. Is this a song? A voice came from inside the forest. Who is inside it was something she could just ignore, but Renée was curious. Some of the songs are good to listen to, but it's because she felt a sense of déjà vu, as if she had heard it somewhere. It feels similar to when I got the book from Mr. Rudger. Renée was curious and unwittingly moved her steps towards the source of the sound. Let's just check. There's still time until Rudger's class anyway. With that in mind, a small open space that greeted Renée, who was heading into the forest. It was not a natural place since the vacant lot was very neat, as if someone had been managing it before. Besides, there was even a small flower bed nearby. Who is it? Did the gardener do it? With that thought in mind, she slowly walked towards the center of the vacant lot. The melody that had been heard a while ago was no longer heard. Who are you? This is a place no one comes to. A voice came from behind her back. Renée looked back in surprise and saw someone sitting on a thick branch and looking down at her. Who are you? Well. The young man, who seems to be the owner of the flower bed, questioned her reaction and eventually realized that he had just come here by chance. He let out a small laugh, then jumped off the tree and landed lightly in front of Renée. Renée's eyes widened at the quick movements. Did you come here by chance? Oh, that. Renée was belatedly able to recognize who the other person was. He was a sophomore, and above all, the dark blue hair color he had was easy to recognize. Senior? Freuden. Freuden Ulberg, the eldest son of the Ulberg family, who symbolizes the wolf, one of the 3 duke families of the Exilian Empire. He is also a student who is regarded as the head of the noble faction in Theon. Is this the flower bed that Senior Freuden was managing? Renée realized that she had entered the tiger's den. The rumors about Freuden had already spread among other students, and his notoriety among the commoners grew because he is the leader of a faction made up of noble students who openly despise and harass commoners. He was also the eldest son of the Freudian family, unmatched by anyone except the imperial family, so commoner students were afraid of Freuden. The fact that aristocratic students looked down on and harassed commoners was to the extent that it was even said that this man had given orders from above. For commoner students, Freuden was the final boss to be wary of and fear more than anyone else. To see such Freuden Ulberg alone in a place like this. No, it's ruined. Renée thought about whether she should run away right now. For more chapters, join my Patreon, link in description.